Stan, we're live.
Thank you to Larry, the Liberty guy. Welcome back to In the Dugout. I am your host, Mike Stenhouse. And you know what? They started spring training pitchers and catchers last week. Full squads report this week for most teams. So we'll be wearing a lot of Red Sox caps now that we're in baseball season here on In the Dugout. And I hope the Red Sox have a much better season. Now I'm looking, and Larry, Liberty guy, maybe you can tell me, but it looks like our chat is still down.
Functioning on my end.
So functioning on your end.
That's a peculiar one. I did receive reports from some people that it was working and other people that it was not. I have real questions about what YouTube is doing.
All right, it looks like it's open. All right, so it looks like we may have been unblocked from the chat. YouTube seems to think we're part of the QAnon conspiracy group, and we're not. So hopefully, we'll look forward to your questions and comments on In the Dugout. Okay, today we've got back with us is our Ray Rickman, who is our regular contributor on everything race relations, hot topic in our country today. It's also we're nearing the end of Black History Month, so it's all fitting that probably should have had Ray on earlier, but we'll have Ray on to talk about a couple of interesting pieces that have appeared in the Providence Journal, one by him, one by Patrick Connolly, Rhode Island's great historian, who wrote a piece on the first African-American elected official in our state. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Black religion in Rhode Island and an event that Ray's group is promoting. We'll tell you about that. It's actually tonight, an online experience. And then I'm going to ask Ray two tough questions. You know, Ray, we come on, Ray, we let Ray talk about, we enjoy having Ray, but the quid pro quo to that is he's going to answer some tough questions for me about race relations that I think probably many of you share as well. Then we're going to get into, we're going to have Justin Katz on, and we're going to go through the ballot measures. For most of you know, many of you might have already voted on it, but there are 7 ballot measures. They're going to cost Rhode Islanders a lot of money this year if you approve them, or a lot of money over the next 20 years if you approve them. We'll go through those very quickly with Justin, get his views on that. And we're going to show you the video that our center put out today, countering the $100,000 advertising campaign designed by special interest unions who are going to benefit from this massive bonds should they pass. And listen, they always pass in Rhode Island. People just vote to spend, and re-elect people who will vote to spend. It's the Rhode Island way right now, but we're still going to tell you why you shouldn't vote to spend. So stay tuned for that. And then hopefully we'll end with a quick hit from Patricia Morgan, who's got a bill that we're interested in her telling us about to help restaurants through the pandemic. And but there's a caveat there. They are in session today. And if Patricia is out in time from the House, the General House, I forget what they call it when they all get together, not the caucus, but when they all get together in the House for their daily activities, if they're released before 5 o'clock, Patricia Morgan will call in and tell us about that bill. All right, tomorrow we're going to have a very interesting show, a little bit different. It is baseball season, but it's not baseball season for Brown University baseball team because Ivy League canceled all spring athletics, all athletics across all 8 Ivy League schools. Can you name all 8 schools? Go ahead. Type them in the YouTube. Go ahead. All 8 Ivy League schools. And we're going to have the captain of the team and a number of other players from the team will join us and talk about how they're frustrated with their school and their league and their conference for canceling their season for the 2nd straight day. And it's because of COVID, right? Everything's because of COVID, supposedly. But yet all other baseball conferences, all other spring sports conferences are playing, just not the elites at the Ivy League. We're going to find out why. And you're going to hear some blistering. And I'm going to tell you, it's my most blistering commentary yet that I'm working on to open the show tomorrow before we bring on the player. So join us tomorrow at 4 for that. Then after they're on, at the second half of the show, Dr. Boston will come on instead of his usually Thursday slot. I'd like him to come on and talk about the medical ridiculousness that the whatever medical basis the Ivy League might have had for canceling spring sports when everybody else is playing, even high schools in our state are playing. But yet the Ivy League knows better, of course, right? So Dr. Boston will be commenting on that. And then Thursday, we're going to stay with some baseball theme. Former Red Sox general manager Dan Duquette will join us. And we're going to talk about the Red Sox in the upcoming Major League Baseball season. Okay, so that's our lineup for today and the next few days. Before we get into the main play today, just a little batting practice, as I call it, some quick hitters, and then and then when Ray Rickman joins us, we'll have him on. Political life continues here in Rhode Island's Never Never land of make believe. I mean, it's just, I don't even know what the word, astounding to me that so many people can live, can govern under such false and phony pretenses and have their lives governed. Again, still in Rhode Island, we literally have no governor. We have a sitting actual governor in Raimondo who will do nothing until she is confirmed or not. Probably yes. Next week, it looks like, by the United States Senate to be Joe Biden's Commerce Secretary. What a disaster that will be. And then, but then we have a governor in waiting, like the lady in waiting. We have a governor in waiting, and Dan McKee, who has no constitutional authority to do anything. Apparently, Raimondo took some small step there to give him some authority, but we have we went from being a tyranny, one person executive branch rule, to now basically no executive branch leadership, zero, except for Department of Health, and she's completely inadequate at carrying the public relations torch, the health secretary. So we're just living in this pretend land, and who knows when it's going to end. We're still under emergency orders by the executive branch. We still have a General Assembly that is just allowing the executive branch to do that. They could step in and stop it anytime they want. They could stop the crazy shutdowns and all the other crazy mandates, but they have refused to engage since day one. So we literally have no governance right now in our state. That's, you know what? It's probably better than the governance we've had over the last 10, 20, 30 years. Wouldn't you agree with me on that? So, but still, it's a shame. You may have seen that, I love it when things boomerang on people, especially when they do something for dishonest reasons. The Department of Health all of a sudden just added 90 people to the death list 2 days ago, or yesterday. They did it because they got to keep the fear up. They got to keep you willing to be subject to all these executive orders, emergency orders, and harsh mandates. I mean, the numbers are going down precipitous. I mean, amazing down. The cases, the deaths, the hospitalization. They can't have that. How can they convince you that they need to still control your life? So they throw in 90 more deaths somehow, that they've now recategorized deaths from months and months and months ago as COVID deaths, so they can have a headline of 90 new COVID deaths. But now, guess what? Those 90 new figures has now catapulted Rhode Island, embarrassingly again, to the third highest death rate per capita in all America, only behind New York and New Jersey. So this is clearly boomerang on them, in their manipulation of the data to keep the fear alive, to spread a headline. They're now embarrassed, again, as being one of the top 3 worst states in America for per capita deaths, supposedly because of this disease. So I just love it when stuff like that backfires. All right, here's another headline. Here's another land of make-believe headline in the Providence Journal today. Apparently tonight, there's going to be an online town hall meeting where House Manager of the impeachment, David Cicilline, is going to be joined by Sheldon Whitehouse, another guy, who's all for using the law to go after his political opponents. And they're going to talk about what a great impeachment trial and it was, and how terrible Trump is, and all that. I mean, it was a failure. Their impeachment was an abject failure. Not only did they get a conviction, but they were embarrassed for presenting manipulated and false evidence. But no one in the media is going to ask them about that, of course. We talked about this last week with Cicilline. And in fact, look for my Echo next month, my article in the Rhode Island Echo next month, where I really tell the whole story about David Cicilline on this. All right, so that's tonight. There's going to be this make-believe online forum for everyone who hates Trump and loves David Cicilline for being an impeachment manager. Also on the land of make-believe today, General Assembly members, I believe from the House, had a press conference to talk about their tax the rich bill. In the real world, as evidenced recently by New York and Connecticut and California, and have we seen in other countries, I think France, maybe Australia, I think as well, class warfare, tax the rich schemes have failed dramatically. Failed so bad that they had to they had to undo the high taxes years ago. It thwarted economic growth in states. People are fleeing California, people are fleeing New York, people are fleeing New Jersey, people are fleeing Rhode Island. We're probably going to use the U.S. congressional seat because of it, all because we're overtaxed. And our economies are suffering because the very people we're taxing, the very wealth we're taxing, is the wealth that's needed for capital investments to start or grow or expand businesses. How can you have a good paying job without a good solid business? You can't. And how can you have a good solid business without wealthy investors? You can't. But in the left's land of make believe, none of those things matter. We'll just go ahead, forget what happened in Connecticut and New York and California. Forget what's happened in Rhode Island with people leaving. Those things aren't going to happen in Rhode Island. Absolutely, it's just ridiculous. It's just they live in this land of make believe. So I'll go on a little bit more on that. I just want to ask, in case I miss it, is our guest on yet, Larry?
Not yet, Sten.
All right, can you reach out to him? And I'll keep going a little bit on that. So this make believe income tax, this make believe benefits from the wealth tax that the left wants to impose upon us. Here's a few more details. So they want to raise the state income tax by 50%, from just under 6% to just under 9%, for Rhode Islanders earning over $475,000 in a year. They say that will raise an estimated $128 million a year. Now, it looks like Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress in the United States are going to be sending Rhode Island over $1 billion. Our budget deficit because of the pandemic is only $500-600 million now, estimated down from about the billion. So Rhode Island is going to get twice as much money from the federal government than we lost because of the pandemic, because so many businesses shut down, less people paying income taxes, sales taxes, whatever. And yet they're on this constant, voracious appetite for more money we don't need, and money that you will not get. They stray straight line. Well, if everything stays the same, if nobody changes their behavior and we raise the income tax by 50% on wealthy people, then we estimate we'll get 120. But that's not how it works. People do change their behaviors. When something costs more, people buy less of it. When people are taxed more, they will do less of taxing activities, or they will just flat up, get up and go and leave our state. There is no way they're receiving the $128 million they think they're receiving. They're going to receive some more money, but they're going to crush our economy by probably 3, 4, 5, 10 times that much. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's the way it always works out. And they don't get it. I mean, how many last place finishes in national economic rankings do we need before these lunkheads up at the General Assembly understand that the path we're on is destroying our state, at least relative to other states? I mean, do you have any? I mean, it's so tempting just to get up and move to a prosperous state where you don't have to deal with this anymore. And a lot of Rhode Islanders have left because many places in America don't think this way, the way that the people in Rhode Island think. They're so insulated in this never land of make-believe bubble around here that they don't see any other way. And I think we're in a pandemic. I think a lot of people have been hurt medically and economically, and this may not be a good time to add extra tax burden on people and on our economy. On top of everything else, as we're trying to recover from a pandemic, they want to slap $130 million more taxes on our economy. Does any of this make sense to you? Regardless of what the economics say, and the economics are clear, and the empirical evidence in other states is clear that this is harmed states. No matter their agenda moves forward, the far left gets what it wants. Apparently today at this press conference, we know that Senator Michael McCaffrey, now this is the majority leader of the United States Senate, not the president, which is Dominic Ruggiero, but the majority leader, Senator Michael McCaffrey, is the one who sponsored this wealth tax, this class envy, class warfare tax in the Senate. Senator Melissa Murray apparently spoke at the press conference today. She's a bill sponsor. Representative Karen Alzadi, Democrat House 60. She's a House bill sponsor of that version of it. And George Nee, President of Rhode Island, what the heck interest does he have in raising the income? Oh, we know what it is. Do you know? What the unions have figured out is that the more money government spends, the more union people paying dues, I should say, the more dues paying government union people are needed to spend that money, whether it's on social services or whatever. So the unions are willing to sacrifice our state's economic well-being so they can have more dues paying members, so they can have more political power. Do you see the way the game is played? It's sickening. All right. I don't know where our guest is. We have a tight schedule today, so we're not going to be able to accommodate Ray. So I'm going to tell you about the topic we were going to discuss with Ray. It is Black History Month. I'm going to at least cover his topic, even if he's not here. There are two interesting articles in recent weeks in the Providence Journal. One by our guest Ray Rickman and his partner at the Stages of Freedom, an editorial that was in Saturday's paper, and then maybe 10 days ago there was an interesting opinion piece by Patrick Conley, a guy I really respect. He's I think is he a Rhode Island's official historian laureate? I think he is. So I think he's Rhode Island's official historian. But either way, he's a great historian, and he's president of the Rhode Island Heritage Hall of Fame, which inducts which recognizes many great people. Larry, we're not ready to show that website yet. So Patrick Conley wrote an article, Rhode Island's first Black legislator. And this, of course, is during February, which is Black History Month. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name yet, but it was a gentleman named Reverend Mahlon, that's spelled M-A-H-L-O-N, Mahlon Van Horn. I can pronounce that. It's a Dutch name. He was the state's first Black legislator. Van Horn apparently was a minister at a Black congregational church in Newport. He was born, however, in Princeton. This is Mahlon Van Horn, and after becoming a minister, he became the first person of color to sit on the Newport School Committee. Now, one of the questions I want to ask, now we're back in, he was born in 1840. So it looks like, we're probably talking about the 1870s or 80s here. I imagine if Van Horn was on, an African-American himself was on the Newport School Committee, that schools were integrated back then. Now, I don't know for sure if, that's one thing I want to ask Ray, because Ray Rickman is a great historian himself. I don't know for sure if schools were integrated in the 1880s or not, at the K through 12 level. If anybody knows that, go ahead and put it in the chat. But he was the first person of color to sit on the Newport School Committee, and he sat there for 20 years. And he chaired the committee on textbooks. Wow. We could probably use a guy like Mahlon Van Horn chairing our committee on textbooks and many school committees across the state with some of the curriculum that they're advancing right now. So Mahlon Van Horn then became the first Black member of Rhode Island's General Assembly. Back then they had 1-year terms. He served 3 successive terms from 1885 to 1887. And as you might guess, because of the influence of Lincoln, he was a Republican. And as the article describes it, the party of emancipation. Apparently he joined with a Democrat, a gentleman named Downing, to try to integrate all public schools across the state. So apparently some were integrated and some weren't at that time. So the article goes on to kind of answer the question. He was involved with a colored union labor league, a group that helped freed slaves gain employment skills. And apparently this Mahlon Van Horn taught in Newport. And again, he's Rhode Island's first elected African-American. He would then go on to be recognized by President William McKinley, who recognized Van Horn's Mahlon public service in 1897 by appointing him to the U.S. consul to the island of St. Thomas, which is then part of the Danish West Indies. And as you probably know, and I was there 2 years ago, St. Thomas is now part of the American Virgin Islands. Now you might think of being assigned as a consul to some far off island is really just an insignificant ceremonial post. But no, this Van Horn, Black American lawmaker, now serving the federal United States government during the Spanish-American War in 1898. And this is cool. Apparently, Van Horn was instrumental in preventing the Spanish fleet from purchasing the coal it needed to fight across America and across Cuba during the Spanish-American War. They needed coal for energy back then for all kinds of reasons. And apparently coal was produced on St. Thomas, and Van Horn blocked, who was then America's enemy, Spain, during that war, from obtaining coal. So that's pretty cool. Mahlon Van Horn's son also graduated. Also became famous. He graduated from Howard University, which is I think a predominantly Black, if not all Black school in Washington, D.C. And his son, Alonzo Van Horn, became Rhode Island's first Black dentist. In 2005, Mahlon Van Horn, posthumously, of course, was inducted into the Rhode Island Heritage Hall of Fame. I mean, that's a tremendous story. That's a great story. And that's a great legacy. And all too fitting. It's great to learn about the accomplishments of men like this and women like this that we probably had never heard of before. Mahlon Van Horn, Rhode Island's first elected Black General Assemblyman, who went on to help his nation win a war diplomatically. Pretty cool. And then his son carried on his legacy. All right, I'm going to share this with you. We're also going to talk with Ray. I hope he's okay. I know Ray's a busy guy, does a lot of Zooms. But Ray, as you can see, wrote a piece that appeared in the Providence Journal just this past Saturday. He wrote it with Rob Dimmick, who helps him run Ray's group, Stages of Freedom. And it's a story about the rich history of Black spirituality, and where America, where in America, they argue in this piece that right here in Rhode Island, right here in Newport, was really the foundation of Rhode Island's, of the country's dedicated Black religious roots. That Rhode Island, as they say in the piece, was ground zero for Black religion in America. Prior to the 1780s, 1790s, Blacks worshiped in white churches. But at some point, enterprising Black leaders, along with apparently some support, I'm not sure if they were Black or white, but apparently with some support from some donors, he built the first dedicated Black church in Rhode Island. And really that began the first dedicated, I don't know. I assume it's a direct descendants. Again, this is why I wish Ray was here. The kind of Black faith that we see on movies and news clips all the time. Apparently that kind of stuff started right here in Newport, Rhode Island, and set the trend nationally for that. So at that time, many Blacks, just like Rhode Islanders in Connecticut and New Jerseyites and New Yorkers flee in those states, Blacks started fleeing the white churches and started going into these newly formed Black churches. So it's a good piece. If you have a chance to go back and look at the Providence Journal from last Saturday, you'll see the piece from Ray Rickman in there. All right, one last thing before we move on. Obviously, I'm not here to ask Ray the big questions, but Ray did ask me to promote, if you'd like to learn more about the history of the Black church in Rhode Island, at stagesoffreedom.org, I believe. Yeah, stagesoffreedom.org, starting tonight. Oh, ending tonight. There was a segment last night, apparently. What is today? What's today? Tuesday, right?
Tuesday, Stan.
Gosh, Tari. So last night they had a segment. Tonight is the second part of the segment. It's free. You can go to stagesoffreedom.org and you'll see a history of the Black church in Rhode Island. And I know that they put on good shows and have really good presenters. Larry, you said you watched a show earlier about Frederick Douglass.
I did. It was absolutely excellent. I was moved by Frederick Douglass's commitment to freedom, right? As somebody who believes deeply in these things, it was fantastic to watch and hear the history of that from a preeminent scholar. And his name escapes me, but the life of Douglass should be an inspiration to us all.
All right, great. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about bond referenda. So here to join us, as he will every Tuesday, is our own Justin Katz, editor of the Ocean State Current and the Center's research director. Justin, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Well, thanks for having me back. By the way, for your viewers, Ray Rickman is also doing a speech on his own life and civil rights activism. You can get to it from the Tiverton Library website. It's a live Zoom thing, so you don't have to be from Tiverton, but I think it's next Wednesday.
Thank you for that. Very cool. Very cool. All right, now you promised last week you're going to have a chapeau for us today. What do you got?
Well, I figured since we're talking about budgets, I ought to have have my eye shades, like an accountant.
What is that?
Oh, it's just eye shades, you know.
Oh, I see. Okay,
I was going to go with a green eye shade, but the green screen, I didn't know how that would work.
Looks like Justin's ready to play some poker.
Yeah, you look.
Exactly.
Yeah, you look like one of those bean counters at the
the casino. Yeah, well, that's the other look, right? Well, we're doing bonds. We're borrowing money. It's just gambling, right?
Wow. Okay. All right. So, so before we get into some specifics, so Justin is normally on Tuesdays will be talking with us about legislation, but closely akin to legislation, of course, are bond referenda and voters. They have one more week. You have one more week through next Tuesday. In fact, go ahead and write in the YouTube how you voted on the 7 bond but there are just summarizing without going specific. Justin, what are voters being asked to look at this year?
Well, there are 7 questions, 7 separate bond initiatives. Most of them have to do with facilities. One of them, the first one, is for higher education facilities, like a fine arts center at URI. All 3 of the public colleges and universities have some piece of that one. The second one is for beach maintenance, clean water, green.
All right, well, we'll go through them specifically, but they're all spending bonds, right?
Yeah, most of them are to buy capital stuff. But one notable thing this time around is some of them are actually to fund programs and create funds, which is usually not something you use debt for. That's one different thing this time around. And
the total cost of these bonds is, if all 7 together?
Well, the principal, the amount they're hoping to borrow, is $400 million. The interest that they're estimating at a kind of an eye-popping 5% for essentially a guaranteed investment is $242 million. So you're talking about 60% on interest over 20 years for these things. So a total of $642 million.
$42 million. Now, taxpayers eventually have to pay for that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
sooner than they think, probably.
There's a line in the budget that says debt service or something like that.
Yeah, and it keeps going up. I haven't checked it recently, but it's just a percentage of the budget, more and more of your budget that you can't use for other things.
Right. And it squeezes out other spending, or just raises our taxes so they can do all the spending they want. Right now, we've generally come out, when we're going to go through the video we came out with earlier today, but to use the term of the year, is any of this $642 million, in your view, essential spending?
No, none of it's essential. I mean, I went to URI, the fine arts building. I did a lot of music courses there. It's an older building. It could use some upkeep, but it's not necessarily something you do when you're in a recession driven by a pandemic, when lots and lots of people can't work. Now, that's one piece of it. The other notable thing, as I said, is some of these are programs. So $7 million for arts and ecology grants and preservation grants. If you think about that, $7 million, the state budget's now above 10 billion, 11, 12 billion dollars. If you could find that 7 million for your program in the budget, you'd save 4 million. And that's what's really starting to, as I looked at these bonds, really started to, it's not only essential, it's inadvisable to borrow money. I mean, if you found the 15 million for the childhood education or child care bill bond, you would save 9 million in interest, which could pay for your arts center or your arts stuff. I mean, it's really at this point almost an insulting.
All right. Well, why don't we do this? Let me share a web page, and then you can explain, because you did the research on this. So if you go to rifreedom.org/reject, you'll see the video, which we'll play for you in a little while. You'll see our media release, but then at the bottom, there's some bullet points that Justin put together. So these, if you look at collectively, these are the reasons we think it's inadvisable to vote for these bonds. So Justin, why don't you take us through those bullet points there? Can you see those okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I know we tend to have a fuzzy when I share screen. I don't know how this one turned out, but
yeah. So the first bullet point is that debt is coming on $15,000 per taxpayer in Rhode Island. That means that the amount of money that the state owes, and we're not talking towns, no, this is towns and cities, sorry. The amount that is owed is that much for every person. So it's as if you bought a car but you gave it to the state. That's the first one there. Per capita, hold on. That's about $10,000 per capita per person. Again, these are putting us in the top of the country. So we're third in the country for that.
When you say top, you mean worst.
Worst, top spenders. I guess it depends on your perspective. So one thing, as I was sort of referring to before, in general, Rhode Island's interest that we owe on the principal for these bonds is very high at 25%. But these
25% of the overall budget?
No, I think it's 25% of the principal.
Okay.
But what we're looking at for these bonds is you pay 60% of your principal in interest as it accumulates. Now that's not the rate, obviously, but it's 5% a year or that sort of thing adds up to about 60% that you end up paying 60% premium. So especially on those ones where we're essentially funding a program rather than capital expense, that really adds up. And really, literally all you're doing is pushing a tax increase to the future at a 60% premium. And it just doesn't make sense. And the last one there, I was looking, we've followed with the center. I was following before I was with the center some 10 years ago, started some 10 years ago, my out-migration from the state. We're always losing taxpayers. And there was a fight some 15, 20 years ago over who was leaving. And the assumption was it was the rich people. And my research showed that, no, actually, it's what I call the productive class. These are people who are just trying to find a way to make a living.
Can't afford the high taxes and regulations, right, and lack of good jobs and bad education, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're arguably the most, from a economic point of view, arguably one of the most valuable demographics constituencies, because these are folks who are going to put in their own labor, their own investment in order to make something of their lives. But those are the folks that, if you look at the data, this came from, I think it was United Van Lines, just a study of people moving in and out of Rhode Island. The people leaving are those young folks who are really just trying to start their lives. And that really gets to be a problem.
Well, we may have a major problem if we lose a congressional seat once the census data from last year is released. We know we're right on the edge. We know we're losing population relatively, even though our gross population is level, our relative population compared to the rest of the country and almost every other state is going down. And whether that costs us a seat or not, we'll find out soon. All right. So one other thing before we get into the specific questions. Would you say a general statement would be, look, we had, it looks like hundreds of thousands of dollars donated by private and government unions to support this big government spending, the $642 million. So it would only stand to reason that those same unions have an interest in that and they're going to benefit. It seems to me that a lot of construction jobs and a lot of the programs are going to mean more dues paying union, government union, and private sector union jobs. So they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, hoping, it looks like to me, to get tens of millions or even hundreds of millions for themselves. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that makes. I mean, in Rhode Island, the bond initiatives almost always pass because they have that. It's almost like an open goal shot because you have that built-in constituency of people who know that's their work for the next 20 years versus you and me going, it's $25. Oh, I have to go get coffee. I'm going to not be able to go vote. That's the imbalance that always makes these things pass.
So that's a great point. And the lesson here, to me, I would say, under healthy economic times, it would be the free market that would be creating new construction jobs, new buildings, new developments, new whatever going up that people would want to invest in because of our state. But during times when our state is not an attractive place for people to invest and develop, we have to force it. They try to keep those jobs alive by having me and you pay for it.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
Keep their union jobs, right?
Absolutely. And in this case, you actually add in a layer of insult to that because as I was saying, you're paying for things. You could say, okay, let's fix up the Fine Arts Center at URI, find $100 million in our budget and it'll create some jobs, which is good in that regard. But the interest on that is $65 million, which if you look at it would pay for the whole housing and community support program they want more debt for. That indicates another constituency, and that's the financial services market, who are getting these guaranteed 5% a year benefits from buying these bonds in the first place. So I think between the unions wanting just the jobs that arguably we could pay for through if we had a healthy economy, you're also adding in there a gift basically to the financial services sector.
All right. So there is a voter information handbook online. You can find it at vote.sos.ri.gov. The election, as you can see, goes through next Tuesday. A lot of people are voting early. All right. So let's go through very quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time on any one. I just want to give people a flavor for what's in the bonds. Here's a summary of the 7 bonds, how much each, the interest. There's the $242 million in interest you talked about, the $642 million total that's going to cost us over 20 years. All right. So the first one is more higher education facilities. And my question is, why are we spending so much for new buildings at our education facilities when most of the students who graduate leave our state?
That's a good question, especially with the, as we've shown, the people who are leaving are the younger folks. They're not coming here and saying, I'm going to build my life here. Every now and then you get a high profile one who does something like that, but it's not the common usual thing. So that is a good question. I mean, we have to maintain facilities that we have, but is it really the investment we want to make at this time?
Yeah. And during a pandemic, when people are struggling, is it essential that we have a new fine arts center at URI? Is it essential? Right. What do you say?
I would say no. And especially, I mean, you do also have to ask what's the focus of the university. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now, especially with kids out of not being able to take classes at colleges. And some people are saying that whole higher education bubble is about to pop. Some of the degrees that you're not going to make a whole lot of money from are in that building. So it does beg the question, is this really where we want to be putting our money right now?
Then there's the ever-present green stuff, whatever. I mean, it could be any, we always see it on these bonds. This one's clean water. I mean, who's going to say no to clean water, Justin?
Yeah, we want dirty water. Yeah, well, that's
conservatives want dirty water. Don't you know that?
It always sounds good, right? State beaches, parks, campgrounds. We're going to upkeep them, but again, we're driving out people who are trying to work. For years, people have always tried to use the excuse, well, Rhode Island has high taxes, but we've got great quality of life. The difference that is never drawn is between the people who can afford the quality of life and the people who can't. And I think these are some of the areas where
But it's just a giveaway to the environmental left, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it. And also some of us union, dredging rivers and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, fine. All right. Question 3. Again, housing, affordable housing. Listen, the other approach would be, the free market approach would be, let's have such a good economy with so many good paying jobs and so many well-run and profitable companies that people can afford the housing that's on the market now. rather than continue to hurt our economy and then have to do these band-aids so people can live in these barely livable, affordable units. Thoughts,
Well,
Justin?
yeah, well, not only that, but get rid of some of the regulations and zoning that make it difficult to
Right.
build, to maintain houses, and then there would be more on the market. The price to build them would be lower, and people would be able to afford them. I mean, there are ways around this without having government come in and start buying up property in order to force.
I mean, do you get the feeling that the government wants people to be dependent on its services and handouts?
Well, yeah, certainly, especially if you look at, people. I think the income rate, it was 32-year-olds and younger were the biggest demographic leaving Rhode Island in the last couple of years. Those are the folks who need an affordable house, and if the market isn't providing it, here comes government. You're now indebted to them if you want to stay here.
All right. This one really irks me. Didn't we just impose tolls to fix our roads and bridges?
Yeah, well, that was supposed to fix it, wasn't it? Roadworks didn't seem to work. No, they'll just keep borrowing. I mean, it's in their plan to just borrow. So even when they have a new revenue source, and this was I remember when the tolls were being debated. Patricia Morgan was a representative then as well at the time, saying, you're really imposing this on my constituents for something we're already being taxed for, and that's a very good point.
Yep. Again, childhood care and education capital fund, whatever the heck that is. This is just a giveaway to left-leaning service groups in the state, in my view. Is there a union connection here?
Well, yeah, the more government is paying for, the more leverage the unions have to say those have to be official unionized jobs, especially if they're pushed through the schools as they're being pushed recently.
Yeah, all the pre-K stuff was, again, people, which this probably goes to support. It's just a ruse to get more dues paying teachers. That's all.
Right.
It's very simple. I mean, they give you all these nice sounding emotional reasons. Cultural arts. Again, who can say no to cultural arts? But again, during a pandemic, is this the time to be spending that kind of money?
Well, yeah, especially because this is a grant program. This is normally something, it would be just a normal program that's funded through taxes. Instead, we're borrowing money at a very high interest rate. We're essentially spending $4 million just out the door in order to give away $7 million to a few handpicked companies. And
these are private companies.
Yeah, and I can understand they're probably hurting due to the government shutdowns, but do we really, especially given the interest we're paying on these things?
There are other
take our
private
money.
companies that are hurt.
Oh yeah, they're going out of
small
business.
Businesses that were hurt, and there was federal money available to them, and we didn't. And the governor Raimondo didn't give it to them.
Yep, they held it for months and then bragged about the little bit that slipped through their fingers.
But they're not in the left-wing cultural woke arena. Regular small businesses. You guys suck. So. All right, last one. Industrial facilities. Davisville, I guess. Yeah, that's the big one. Again, more union jobs, construction jobs, right? Isn't just the translation here, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the thing that always strikes me about Quonset is we've made it such a horrible environment to work in, an economic environment in Rhode Island, that the few success stories are the ones that are heavily subsidized. And I mean, I guess you could debate whether they're successful, but that's what this is. It's basically you have to carve out a little area that gets government money in order to make it possible to do business here. Again, why borrow money when you can just ease the restrictions a bit and you'll start seeing things loosen up?
So your recommendation on do you approve any of these bond questions, Justin?
No, I always vote no on all the bonds, but on this time especially, it's just in a special election during a pandemic with some of the bonds being programmatic instead of capital investments. I mean, there's an argument to be made sometimes. You when you're going to build something long term, you borrow because then people in the future are paying for their use of it. I could see that argument, but in some of these, like the education one, for example, there isn't even that excuse. So just people should make sure that they find a time to go vote, because that's our civic duty. And I'm going to vote against all of them. It's pretty easy to just reject.
All right, so we put out a video today, which I'm going to have Larry, the Liberty guy, play in just a moment. But first, I just want to remind you, you can go to our center's page, rifreedom.org/reject. And we're using the hashtag reject the 7, all 7 questions, RI. You can read our media release here. And there was a nice video that, so Justin, why don't you explain, there was a little bit of controversy about the unions. We mentioned how they've invested hundreds of $1,000s in approve the referenda ad campaign. And the video, much like Cooler Warmer 1 that they produced, they spent massive amounts of money on an out-of-state firm, didn't even use an in-state firm, and they got the geographical pictures wrong again. What do you know about that?
And the people. I mean, so the firm was out of Boston, I believe. So Massachusetts firm, and a lot of the footage used in the video, which is kind of ironic, beaches and jobs for Rhode Islanders. Here's a picture of somebody from New Hampshire or whoever it might be. So that was the little bit of scandal they got caught up in there was just failing to provide jobs to Rhode Islanders while they're trying to get Rhode Islanders to heavily invest in their own jobs. It's kind of, I want to say ironic, but it's to be expected.
So our chairman, Dr. Stephen Scoley, who also runs a little movie production company, and he's created ads, on the first Cooler Warmer debacle, in about 3 hours, he put together at virtually no cost a far better video than the state produced at millions and millions of dollars of cost to an out-of-state firm that got all the pictures wrong, used out-of-state pictures, of course. And once again, Dr. Scoley and Joe Doc Productions has put together a video, which we're going to show you in just a minute, as a counter to the union's, again, debacle of a video ad. I mean, what is so hard about using Rhode Island firms? It's like with Trump, buy America. What's so hard about that? Buy Rhode Island. And to get the picture, get Rhode Island images and video in the thing. What's so hard about that?
I think it just shows they don't necessarily really care. I mean, they've got their national organizations and they're just picking contracts for whatever their purposes might be.
All right, so we're going to show the video that produced with Rhode Island imagery by a Rhode Island firm at virtually no cost, which is far better than the video the unions put out. Go ahead, Larry the Liberty Guy, give it a go.
Vote no on all 7 spending bills. We spent enough money. Massive tax and spend policies, which have continued for years, are forcing many Rhode Islanders to leave the state. To prevent further taxation for Rhode Islanders, we must vote to reject all 7 questions on the March ballot. Rhode Island already suffers from far too much debt. The $400 billion in bonds are estimated to cost $642 million, according to the Secretary of State's office. The economic disaster as a result of the catastrophic pandemic is another reason not to borrow money. Look, debt is just delayed taxation. Despite a crushing medical and economic pandemic, Rhode Island politicians just keep on fiddling that same tax and spend tune. Vote no on all 7 spending bonds. We spent enough money.
I can confirm that was really Rhode Island State House in the background.
That was.
Yes.
And that bridge was the $20 million bridge to nowhere, right? I think too, that was on the beginning of it. So we love to spend and blow money in Rhode Island. All right, Justin Katz, thank you very much for your perspective on all this. And we'll see you next Tuesday on In the Dugout.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Justin. All right, I've been a little distracted here because I know that Patricia Morgan has been calling my cell phone, apparently trying to get on the show.
Stan, we have her in the waiting room right now by phone.
All right, that's good. She said she's probably calling from the State House. So let's bring her on. But as we bring her on, let me just remind everyone, go to rifreedom.org/reject, as in reject the 7 ballot questions, to see our media release and to watch the video. And go ahead, share share the video on social media. It's been quite popular. We're getting pretty good response to it. Channel 10 called me today, and I did an interview with them to talk about the bond. So that's good. Okay, so Tuesdays normally is legislative day. And guess what? We have an actual Rhode Island legislator on the phone with us. Patricia Morgan, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Patricia, could you hit *6, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, good.
You're at the
I am
State House.
upstairs in the balcony of the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, so you might hear some noise behind me. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you just fine. All right, I'm going to quiz you first, okay?
Yes.
Malin Van Horn. Do you know who that is?
Mailing Van Horn? No.
All right, I didn't think so, but it's Black History Month. We were going to have Ray Rickman on as a guest, but he, for some reason, couldn't make it. So we covered his content anyway. But in celebration of Black History Month, Patrick Conley, Rhode Island's official historian, wrote a nice piece a few weeks ago about Malin Van Horn, who in the, what year did we say that was? When in the 1890s, became the first African-American member of Rhode Island's General Assembly. So, so there you go. You can go show how smart you are to all your other colleagues when you go back to wherever you go. All right.
All right, I will.
All right. So we've got a single topic. Well, like maybe one, but we'll see if it goes to talk about. You had a hearing on one of your bills yesterday. That is House Bill 5345, of which you are the primary sponsor. Tell us about that bill.
This bill, so we know that our restaurant sector has been really, really decimated by the lockdowns. And this bill is one of the things that I think we as a state can do to help them recover. I'll just give you some information before I go into it. $2.8 billion worth of sales is what restaurants did in 2019. At this point, I don't have the latest numbers, but it is down about 40%. They are a huge part of our economy. In fact, in 2019, they accounted for 11% of our economy. They actually employed 56,000 people. Because of the lockdowns, 96% of all restaurants have had to lay off employees, and the layoffs account for 36,000 people. It's an enormous number of people who have been idled by the lockdowns. And 85% of all restaurants say that today they are not profitable. I mean, they're existing, they're opening up their doors, but when you can only let 25% of the capacity in and you have to close early, you are not profitable. They are hanging on by their fingernails. And in fact, 38% think that they are facing bankruptcy. They're going to go out of business. What this bill does is it mandates that all of our utility companies, so electric, gas, sewer, water, telephone, and cable, would give restaurants a no interest, no penalty, 36-month payment plan to catch up on the bills that they are behind on. And it would begin, the payment plan would begin 3 months after the lockdowns are stopped and restaurants can return to normal operating parameters.
So as soon as the state of emergency or any restrictions on restaurants are over, a 3-month clock begins, and then 3 years from that point, you're recommending that they have to work it out individually with the utilities, or?
I'll leave that up to the utility companies, and I understand there's a cost to them to set up these payment plans, but to me, it's either you're going to lose perhaps another 40% of your customers, or you're just going to have late paying customers. I want to make it clear that this does not absolve restaurants of paying their bills. Okay. It just gives them a time to get back up on their feet, gives them some breathing room so that they can become profitable and then pay off their utility bills.
All right. So
remember, even though it's, yeah.
No, go ahead.
even though they've been restricted and mightily restricted in what they can do, they still are heating. They're still lighting their apartment,
They gotta pay
their
their rent.
restaurants.
They gotta
They're
pay
paying their rent. They're paying their taxes, their
staff.
insurance, all of that stuff. So we need to give them some time to get profitable again, and then to start digging into paying off the bills that they've been
All right,
piling up.
just quickly, yes or no? They also have to pay their property taxes. Is there any? Has the government given any relief on that, or is that something they still?
No, I'm afraid not. And I know that that's a big nugget for most small businesses, but at this point, it's there just isn't money in anybody's budget to help them with their taxes.
All right, we're talking with Representative Patricia Morgan from
And,
Coventry.
and quite frankly, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from both sides of the aisle on this.
Well, that's what I want to ask
bill.
you. How did the hearing go? Yeah.
Yeah, both sides liked it. Democrat, obviously, it's a Republican bill, but Democrats liked it as well. And I got suggestion that we add gyms and hotels, which are two other sectors that, they just locked them down and they're making no money.
So what has to happen, do you think, I mean, politically, for this to move? Who are the key people that need to be convinced to move this bill?
Well, we have to get restaurant owners and their patrons, which is everybody in Rhode Island, and their employees to contact their legislators and say they'd love to see this bill passed.
Yeah, but what I mean is who in the General Assembly is going to really make this decision? It's going to be Speaker of the House Shakarchi? Is it going to be the committee chair? It was in House Corporations. Who's the committee chair of that?
Yeah, it's Representative Solomon, or Chairman Solomon is the chairman of the House Corporations, and I'm going to be talking with him about the next steps. There are a couple of things we have to change in the bill, to be honest with you. It was written in the PUC, and the PUC only regulates electric and gas. So we have to find another place for the other utilities, the sewer, the water, the cable, and the telephone. But all of this stuff is doable, and there is support in the chamber for this to happen.
Across the aisle support. There are some Democrats who expressed interest. Will they put their name on the bill as a co-sponsor now?
Well, it's already been put in. I've already submitted it. So at this point, nobody else can put their name on it. Quite frankly, my name is the only one on it, just because it is so different down here. It's very, very hard to go around and get signatures because of our COVID policies.
Yep.
But no, they are interested in it, and they are. I think I'll find some willing helpers.
All right.
To get it passed.
You have a little hope that this can move forward.
It's a good bill, and it doesn't cost the state budget anything. And while I do recognize that there is a cost to the utility companies, again, getting 11% of our economy back up on its feet is worth doing, because they will have those customers. They will not have people defaulting on their bills.
And
they may be paying them a little bit later, but they won't be defaulting, and they won't be empty storefronts.
Yep. It's not, again, the last thing I'll say here on this is, as I mentioned with Justin Cass just a little while ago, many of these restaurants were supposed to be receiving some of the federal aid from the CARES Act last year that was designated for them, but Governor Raimondo refused to distribute that money to the small businesses like restaurants that needed it most. Instead, they're using it to plug budget holes. Your comments on that?
Well, that is obviously, it's bad policy, and it's incredibly short-sighted, because behind these small businesses are many, many, many employees that are now on unemployment, and they're unable to contribute sales tax, income tax, anything to our economy, to our budget. It is really devastating lives. When I was walking this summer, I met some of those families who are idled because their small business has been locked down, and they're really holding on by their fingernails. It is just so sad to see how stressed they are over this. I think it's just really short-sighted, because the best way to help the state's budget, if that's if that's
the
the
business
the
is going.
goal,
Right, yeah.
is to open up the economy and keep these businesses alive and well, and
Okay.
make them productive and profitable again.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for what you're doing with your legislation. Please keep us posted and come back and update us. Thank you. Representative Patricia Morgan, Coventry, Warwick area. Maybe I'm missing a little bit of Foster or something too, but thank you.
West Warwick.
That was okay. Thank you, Patricia.
Okay.
All right. Great show today, everybody. Tomorrow, again, tune in. Whether you're a baseball fan or not, you need to hear what these Brown baseball players have to say about having their season canceled and how it's, in my view, and how you'll hear me say how I think this ties in to a much larger, very dangerous phenomenon that's going on in our country. My most blistering commentary of my In the Dugout career will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. prior to my bringing on the Brown baseball team members. So join us then on In the Dugout at rifreedom.org/live. So for Mike Sten